So hello, welcome to the video and welcome to Long Beach, California, which is the second largest port in the USA and has a fairly modest cruise terminal squirreled away in the midst of it, right next to the Queen Mary. This is the former Cunard ocean liner that conducted over 1,000 trips between Southampton and New York before retiring here in 1967, opening to the public 6 months after I was born in 1971. I was heading there that day to embark on the Carnival Radiance for a 3-night cruise down to Ensenada and back. This trip ran from Friday to Monday, so as Carnival is one of the cheaper cruise lines with a reputation of hosting a good party, I was expecting it to be a bit of a booze cruise, and I was not disappointed. So if you want to see what happened, stick around. Hi, I'm Matt, and I love cruising. I love the ships, the places you visit, the entertainment, and every now and again I'll also enjoy a drink. So subscribe to the channel so you can come with me on my next cruise. I've been allocated a 10:30 boarding slot and I've been quite pleased to get what I thought would be quite an early slot, so I was a little surprised to find absolutely no queue when I got there. 10:30 turned out to be one of the last slots and people seemed to be really keen to get aboard, so I was one of the last to arrive. Which I suppose makes sense. The boarding day made up 1/3 of this cruise, so you're losing out on a lot of the experience you've paid for if you only show up just before the ship sails. This space used to house the Spruce Goose as a partner attraction to the Queen Mary. The Goose was the largest plane to ever fly, which it did only once before this dome was built and landscaped to display it. That explains the hanging models and all of the fake trees. Check-in actually took a while. I don't think many British passport holders were booked onto this cruise and it needed a supervisor to approve my check-in. I actually needed to show them my ESTA, which was my electronic entry permit to the United States. I've never previously had to show this to anyone as it's supposed to be an entirely digital process, but Carnival seemed to follow different rules so needed to inspect it. Fortunately, some epic foresight on my part meant I'd printed it off for this trip, and once it was validated I was checked in and continued through to the airport style security. The waiting area was one of the more attractive spaces you'll find in a cruise terminal. There are the fake trees I mentioned, and you can see that lots of people had beaten me there that morning. Although no one had been called through to the ship yet, so perhaps my later arrival time had actually been the way to go. Then after about 5 minutes the first boarding group was called, and my group was called about 10 minutes after that. Carnival has done a good job of adapting this space into a cruise terminal. It was very spacious, and the hand-me-down features from the Spruce Goose days made the space really interesting to pass through. Overall it was a very relaxed and efficient boarding experience. Just print out your ESTA before you get there. A bit of zigging and zagging before one final boarding pass check, after which we exited the dome onto the gangway and got the first real sighting of our ship, the Carnival Radiance. The ship has an interesting history. It launched a quarter of a century ago in 1998 and at just over 100,000 tonnes was one of the largest ships in the world when it first sailed. But it launched as the Carnival Victory and was actually the very first cruise ship I ever sailed on 15 years ago in 2009. In 2021 she underwent a $200 million refit and was relaunched under this new name, which I suppose makes some sense. New refit, new name. But as you'll see, no one is going to experience this ship and feel like it's only 2 years old. Modern built ships can be well over twice this size and tend to feature far more open and expansive communal spaces. Even a $200 million refit cannot radically change the layout of a ship, and even with new paint and design features you're still stuck with the design and construction decisions made 25 years ago. Which may have been innovative back then, but 25 years is a long time in the cruise design world. I headed straight to my muster station and was marked off the list. I'd described the process as light touch compared to others I've experienced, but they communicated the essentials without causing any real inconvenience to any of the passengers. This was a 3-night cruise with the 2 full days aboard, planned to be a sea day followed by a day in Ensenada in Mexico. This was very early March, so I'd not expected tropical weather and certainly didn't experience any. Indeed, there were storms in the area, so one of the first announcements that I heard was that the scheduled days would be reversed. But the sun was out in Long Beach and it was borderline warm, so I headed up to the pool for a drink. A general rule of thumb for cruising is that the shorter the cruise, the boozier the passengers will be. And this 3-night weekend cruise was no exception to that rule, as I saw some epic displays of drunkenness. I'd not wanted to miss out, so had invested in a drinks package. No drinks were included in the fare I'd bought, and I thought $70 a day was reasonable value for what was effectively a 72-hour open bar. I'd acquired a small amount of onboard credit from the booking and from being a Carnival shareholder, so I was pleased to discover that Carnival was one of the few brands that allow you to spend onboard credit before you actually get on board. So I ended up paying £136 for the drinks package. That limited me to 15 drinks a day, which was enforced. I felt I got good value for my investment, but I never got near to the 15 drink limit myself. But I did see one person cut off at 5 PM for having hit her 15 daily drinks already, which is pretty good going, even if it was a bit of a downer for the rest of her day. One quirk of this US cruise was that sales tax was levied on drinks when we were still in port, 95 cents for that beer, which really slowed down service and produced copious amounts of dockets. Those dockets continued when we set sail when the tax was no longer due, which perplexed me a little as almost everyone had the drinks package. But then I realised that this was done by the crew to give every opportunity for someone to leave a tip, which a few people did, but by no means everyone. So service remained slow throughout the trip, plus reams of paper went straight in the bin, which doesn't burnish Carnival's green credentials much. As for the range of drinks on offer, it was okay, without being anything to get excited about, which given the price I paid was what I expected. A few nice rums could be found and a few interesting cocktails were offered, but this isn't a cruise for drinks connoisseurs. The other crucial element of any cruise is the food, which I thought was pretty good and in some regards was actually very good. The main dining room disappointed me a little. First of all, I was quite looking forward to being seated with others so I could get to meet some new people, but that wasn't possible. Every group had to be seated on their own, which meant as a solo traveller I ended up being Norman no mates each night. This policy was implemented by all cruise lines during the you-know-what, but it's quite disappointing that Carnival hasn't relaxed it since. I'd chosen the anytime dining option and I think I'd have had more luck with a fixed dining time, although the process for making dinner reservations through the Carnival app was so smooth and efficient that I chose not to switch to the rigid dining times of the other dining room. Menus were digital. My phone was virtually dead the first night and it took an eternity for them to find me a printed menu. But the food was good. This prime rib was excellent actually, and I enjoyed all 3 meals I had there. Carnival did lose a stack of marks though by requiring you to recycle your cutlery from the starter to the main course, which alongside not having printed menus was quite annoying and felt like penny pinching. But overall the main dining room food was of a lot higher quality than the experience. Some fairly impressive gluttony was on display here to match some of the alcoholic athletics I'd witnessed. I counted 22 plates being delivered to the table of 4 next to me one night, a group who seemed determined to try every dish on the menu. Their plates were being cleared too, so it wasn't one bite and you're done. It's the first time I've seen a supplement levied for anyone ordering a third entree, which is the main course to non-Americans. A Carnival cruise can be a somewhat different experience to the other cruise lines. And one thing I vividly remembered from my first ever cruise was the dining room entertainment, and Carnival didn't disappoint here. There was some entertainment each night, cheesy and delivered entirely by the waitstaff, but it was great fun and people really got into it. I had 2 breakfasts in the buffet and it was okay. The design of the buffet isn't brilliant and despite the recent refurb it all felt a little bit dated. But the food quality was respectable and you'll not go hungry. I was interested to see that the breakfast bacon was rationed, which reveals another insight into Carnival's clientele. I'll add that the ration available was more than adequate for me. I had my 3rd breakfast in the main dining room. That reservation system made it very easy to do so, and it was pretty good. Eggs Benedict and bacon can't fail to set you up well for the day. But where the Radiance and Carnival in general excels was with the casual dining options available around the pool. Most cruise ships have some sort of burger and hot dog offering, which typically is mediocre at best. Carnival has taken this to the next level and offered no less than 5 casual dining options, a couple of which were branded with some pretty serious names. You could choose from Guy Fieri's Burger Shack, Shaquille O'Neal's Big Chicken, a pizzeria, the Blue Iguana Cantina with excellent tacos, and my favourite, a barbecue place also branded under Guy Fieri's name. People do not lend their names to F&B outlets lightly, so it was impressive to see Carnival committing to a quality offering in an area of the ship other brands don't seem to put much thought into. All 5 options were really good, and as there were so many options, there was rarely a lengthy line for service. I'll make a ship tour video in my usual day in the life format where I'll talk more about all of the food and beverage venues, but I'll quickly add here that there were also 3 speciality dining venues, a sushi bar, an Italian and a steakhouse. I did not go hungry or thirsty on this cruise. So on the second day we pulled into Ensenada. The Jones Act is an interesting topic. It's a 100-year-old protectionist maritime law that prevents foreign-flagged ships from sailing between US ports. So although Carnival is a US corporation, its ships are foreign-flagged, which means all of its cruises starting from the United States have to stop at a foreign port before being able to return to the US. This is great news for Ensenada, as it means it gets a lot of traffic from ships complying with this law, although I'm not sure it would be a beeline destination for cruise ships without this law forcing a stop in Mexico. It's pleasant enough for an hour, perhaps even 2, and there are a few interesting spots to visit close by, but if you're expecting Vancouver, Bridgetown or Lisbon, you'll be greatly disappointed. The second full day was therefore a sea day, and the weather was indeed terrible as predicted. Ensenada is only 160 miles or so south of Long Beach, and we had about 40 hours to get back there, so the captain really didn't have to put his foot down. People did use the pool though, although it was a little too brisk for my blood. My cabin was the cheapest available, which was an inside cabin on deck 1. I'll make a cabin tour video, but I'll say here that it was okay. An okay bed, an okay bathroom, and okay facilities. The towel animals added some excitement, and the decor, well, let's just say you won't feel like you're trapped in the 80s when the lights are off and you're asleep. A word on the crew. They absolutely hate working on this ship. For months and months they cycle between 3 and 4 night trips, so only ever gets to see Long Beach, Ensenada and Catalina Island, which is the extra stop made on the 4-night cruise. Turnaround days, when the old passengers depart and the new ones board, is the worst possible day for the crew, and on this ship they get 2 turnaround days each and every week. It's like Groundhog Day for them without the cute furry thing. They never get the chance to really connect with the passengers as they change so often, and as half of the ship is paralytic by 5 PM every day, it's really a challenging environment for them to work in. But despite all of this, most of the crew were engaged, friendly, helpful, and did a great job of making the experience a good one. Some were a bit grumpy, but even they were nowhere near as grumpy as they probably should be, given the shortness of the straw they'd drawn in being posted to this ship. A word on the cruise director, who was an absolute maniac. The chap literally never stopped, and he just refused to let the party atmosphere sag even for a second. He was exhausting to watch, but he was perfect for the atmosphere Carnival was trying to build. In general, I thought the entertainment was good. There were 3 shows in the main theatre, one each night, which were very lightly attended. There were 3,700 passengers aboard. That's 1,000 over the ship's double occupancy capacity, which means that virtually all of the extra beds available in rooms were occupied. Yet only a couple of hundred of them could be bothered to attend the very entertaining shows. It must be so hard for the cast to put their all into a performance when they can plainly see so many empty seats. The shows were in the evening, so one theory to explain the light attendance was that most of the passengers had already passed out from the drink by this time. But I enjoyed the shows, all of which were delivered by the ship's cast with no guest entertainers. I stopped by the theatre for a bingo session and was quite surprised to see that far more people showed up for that than they did for the shows.
The next one
The theatre also hosted a celebration of the US military, which was not something you see in Europe. All of the branches of the armed forces were celebrated, and the official song of each branch was played, including the US Space Force, which is only 4 years old but already has its own song. Carnival also has a bar dedicated to the military and to veterans. Other entertainment included the usual mix of karaoke, quizzes and silly games. There was a piano bar where I satisfied the needs to hear Bohemian Rhapsody on each and every cruise I ever go on. And a stand-up comedy venue which featured 2 or 3 guest entertainers. And the Energizer Bunny of a cruise director also led parties up on deck in the evenings. High marks overall for the entertainment. So to wrap things up, the 2 questions to ask are: did I enjoy myself and would I book this cruise again? And the answers are yes and no. I had a great time, but as regular viewers of the channel will know, I'm a bit weird. The ship was rammed 1,000 people over capacity, and lots of those people were in large groups. There were bucks nights, hen nights, boys trips, girls trips, birthday trips, anniversary groups. The excuses for getting a group together to get hammered over a weekend on a party ship are almost limitless. There was also at least 1 large wedding party aboard. And I found it fascinating to sit back and enjoy those groups enjoying themselves, even if I wasn't part of a group myself. And the groups that were there were all self-sustaining units and weren't really there to make new friends. So I found it quite hard to talk to people, which is quite unusual for a cruise, and not being matched up with people at dinner made it quite a solitary experience. If I'd gone as part of a ready-made group, things would have been very different, but as a solo traveller, it was a bit of a strange experience. I really enjoyed it, but I can see how others wouldn't. The itinerary is not the point of this cruise, so you can't mark it too far down for only offering Ensenada as a port. The food and entertainment were both good, but as I paid around 450 quid for the basic cruise, which is 150 quid a day, I wasn't expecting excellence on either count. And having paid an extra 140 quid for the drinks, they were also good. This would have been a very strange experience if I'd been the only person aboard over 21 years of age who wasn't drinking. But the ship is old. The refurbs certainly spruced things up and added a lot of new facilities, such as the range of casual dining options around the pools. But it still feels like an old ship, and the central areas just feel claustrophobic, especially with so many passengers in them. And the decor is very, very retro. I'm sure it was a great ship when it was new, but I remember it feeling a little retro when I sailed on it 15 years ago. And sadly I have to report that it's a flat-out relic these days, which is perhaps the reason why it spends its life shuttling between Long Beach and Ensenada on trips where Carnival knows that the passengers are going to be so completely blitzed most of the time that they won't notice the shortcomings of the ship. But this cruise will distinguish itself in my memory for being the first on which I found a cruise duck on a stairwell between floors close to the main dining rooms. Their elevators saw heavy use on this cruise, which may explain why the duck had not already been found in this reasonably obvious spot. I was happy to find it though, but I decided to put it back for somebody else to find. I wonder if it's still there. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Please give this video a like if you did, and please leave me a comment. Is this the sort of cruise you'd like to do? Please subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to support what I'm doing more directly, there is a Patreon account, the link in the description below. Thanks again for watching. See you all in the next one. Bye bye.